Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for tuning into this talk. My name is Anna and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Patron-Minette and the theatrics of crime in Les Misérables. In the novel, crime occupies a central position in portraying the dark underbelly of society and providing social commentary on poverty, immorality and desperation. However, it is within the realm of the Patron-Minette that crime takes on a particularly dramatic and stereotypical form. Labelling the Patron-Minette as a troupe of villains, Hugo invites us to view crime as a grand spectacle, a staged performance where the characters assume specific roles, but there is more to discover beneath the surface, and by situating the Patron-Minette within the broader context of dramatic crime fictions and historical accounts, we gain invaluable insights into the societal perceptions of crime and criminals during the 19th century. Today, I hope to analyse the Patron-Minette's roguish cast through the intricate web of panels between crime's inherently theatrical and dramatic nature and examine how these characters are contextualised within a period of heightened criminal sensation. Part 1. A Quartet of Crooks. Victor Hugo introduces the Patron-Minette by showcasing its four distinct figureheads, who all possess vastly unique characteristics that exist within various theatrical spheres. To refresh our memories, let me provide a brief overview. First, there is Gueulemer, a thoughtless brute with pectorals of marble, biceps of bronze, carnivorous lungs, the torso of a colossus, and the skull of a bird. Victor Hugo suggests that the character was thought to be a Creole. Gueulemer is a killer out of nonchalance and is implied to have been involved in the infamous assassination of Marshal Brune in 1815. The next crook that Hugo introduces us to is Babette, a thin-learned man and a good talker who puts his smiles in italics and his gestures in inverted commas. The character is a jack of all trades who pulled teeth, showed freaks, and performed as a clown at Bobino's before heading off to tackle Paris. His words. The third leader of this crime ring is Clequisot, an enigmatic ventriloquist who would vanish like an apparition and then reappear as though popping up out of the ground. This mysterious figure covers his face with a mask and is later revealed in the novel to be a police informant. Lastly, Hugo introduces us to Montparnasse, who is described as a handsome fashion plate who had fallen on hard times, living in misery and committing murder and mayhem. Unlike his criminal accomplices, Montparnasse is still a mere boy that grew from a gamin to a killer. From these introductory descriptions alone, the theatrics of the Patron-Minette is instantly apparent. Each character has a distinct overarching personality that in some way or another links them to the stage. Evidently, Babette's previous experience in circuses and his eerily charming false persona make it impossible to uncover his true nature. The same applies to Clequisot, whose ventriloquism and refusal to reveal his face enable him to assume any role he desires, leaving us unaware of his true identity. Montparnasse's entire life is a performance. He plays the part of a dashing bourgeois dandy in the day and then engages in nefarious activities at night. As for Gueulemer, it is his body that makes him theatrical. Being likened to the infamous Farnese Hercules statue transforms him into a spectacle of physical prowess and dramatical sensation. With such descriptions, the Patron-Minette stand out as a distinct sort of criminal in Les Misérables. Unlike other instances in the novel where we are encouraged to empathise with characters who resort to crime out of desperation, most notably in the case of Fantine's assault on Bambatois and of course Valjean's original theft of bread to feed his sister's children, the Patron-Minette cannot be so easily applied to what Guy Rosa identifies as the novel's central focus, aka the social question. The Patron-Minette's crimes aren't justifiable, and they lack the human depth found in characters like Fantine. While we wholly understand Fantine's reasoning for attacking Bambatois, we cannot as clearly comprehend the Patron-Minette's reasoning for attacking Valjean at the Gorbeau Tenement. Thus, these criminals exist as stereotyped figures rather than complex characters. However, this is not to say that there isn't any social commentary at play here. If anything, I think Hugo makes a particular point about passages into crime, especially in the case of former street urchin Montparnasse. But what I am suggesting is that these characters do not primarily serve as vehicles for the social critique, with many of the original Patron-Minette chapters being cut before publication. In the final version of the novel, the gang largely exist as generic villains. As readers, we only know of the Patron-Minette in the same way that the other characters in the novel do, through their reputation and their criminal acts alone. Both literally and metaphorically, the gang are a mask. We are introduced to murky figures with faces obscured by soot, whose true identities are unknown. We do not know their personal stories and remain uncertain about their motivations, and when we do learn about their reasonings, they prove unjustifiable. As Catherine Grossman aptly notes, the gang are villainous vaudevilles who assume new aliases, wear masks or disguises, or simply cover themselves in a cloak of deceit. In 1863, La Presse newspaper offered an intriguing analysis of the Patron-Minette in the review of Les Misérables, stating that their portraits are as sharp and precise as a police report. The energy of the execution takes nothing away from their likeness. They are accentuated without being magnified, carried to the highest power of their type without exceeding it and without overdoing it. While I can understand La Presse's commentary on the Patron-Minette being introduced in a manner comparable to a police report, to me, the publication is wrong in its assertion that the descriptions are not dramatized or exaggerated. If we interpret Les Misérables as a social condition novel, as many rightfully have, we must pause to acknowledge that the Patron-Minette do not easily conform to the conventional tropes of the genre. Our focus is not primarily on why they turned to a life of crime. Instead, Hugo is more concerned with dramatically depicting the traits of bad, unjustifiable criminality. Thus, these rogues are stereotyped as social caricatures, and as readers we view them precisely as society would. And it is this factor that enables them to be so theatrical in the novel and sensationalized in their appearances. Part 2. The theatrical and sensational characterization of the Patron-Minette. With these contexts of social caricature in mind, we can now better evaluate the attributes that make the Patron-Minette's heads theatrical. Rather, the criminals of the Patron-Minette are simultaneously the actors of a series of private dramas in Les Misérables, namely the Gorbeau ambush, the attempted siege upon Rue Plumet, and the escape from La Force prison. While Hugo portrays the gang as formidable, stating that they ran the general ambush business of the entire département of the Seine, the narrative of the novel contrastingly presents their failure in carrying out two crucial criminal acts: the Gorbeau ambush and the robbery of Rue Plumet. The Patron-Minette are simultaneously a dangerous organized crime ring and a borderline comedic gaggle of crooks, and this is crucial in solidifying their intrigue and sensationalism for readers. Not only does Hugo give this band of criminals theatrical pasts, but the language of theatre is employed to depict the Patron-Minette as a collective group of actors. Their crimes unfold in a sensational and dramatic manner, positioning them as actors embodying caricatured stereotypes. This group transcends humanity. They exist as mere figures, elusive shadows that roam the depths, resembling savage figures that prowl around this pit, half beast, half phantom. Originating from a counter-society, they belong to the great cavern of evil, beneath the surface of conventional society, in what Hugo describes as the third substage in the introductory Minds and Minors chapter in the Patron-Minette's introductory section. Horace's satires is even evoked to liken the Patron-Minette to troops of flute players, drug sellers, beggars, and actresses. The parallel between crime and theatre does not end there, however. Rather, in the chapter titled Composition of the Troupe, Hugo directly draws a comparison between crime and theatre through the Patron-Minette. In this context, the gang's organised entity is likened to a theatrical company. Let me read a section of the passage for you. They performed the coup d'etat of the underworld on unsuspecting passers-by. Men with ideas in this line, men of nocturnal imagination, came to them to get the job done. People came to these four rogues with the outline that they took care of the stage management. They worked up a script. They were always able to provide the right number and type of personnel for any crime that needed a hand and was sufficiently lucrative. If a crime was short-handed, they subcontracted accomplices. They had a troupe of shady extras at their disposal for any secret underworld drama. The gang is also likened to Proteus, and thus described as an entity capable of assuming multiple disguises. To quote Hugo, lending each other their names and tricks, throwing off their personalities as you take off a false nose at a masked ball. Although these theatrical illusions extended far beyond mere metaphor, in fact, the Patron-Minette are written as employing genuine tactics used by actual criminals of the era, highlighting that the interconnectedness between crime and theatre exists not only in this novel, but rather were realised on a wider scale across society. The influence of real criminal figures. In the same vein as Hugo's classical allusions to mythological and real-life figures, the Patron-Minette are compared to several recognisable criminal personalities in Les Misérables. Perhaps what is most difficult for us as modern readers is understanding who these figures were, an issue that would not have been a concern for the novel's original readership in the 1860s. Hugo's fictionalized rogues are grouped against and thus partially characterized by numerous famous criminals occupying the same social dregs as them, including Cartouche and the infamous Schinderhannes, a German outlaw whose crime sprees made him a figure of legend. Furthermore, we also read of the Patron-Minette being discussed in the same breath as Vidocq and Coquelicot, both former criminals who later began working for the police. Most notable, however, is the comparison between the Patron-Minette and Lacenaire, a notorious real-life criminal who was arrested and executed in 1836 for murder, but made himself a celebrity while in prison thanks to the publication of his memoirs and his theatrical command of the court during his trial. Not only does a fictionalized version of the infamous criminal briefly appear in the novel, attempting to shift blame for his crimes onto the Patron-Minette, but many of Hugo's rogues actually seem to share traits with the real-life figure. It is evident to me that Lacenaire's theatrical personality had a profound influence on Hugo's construction of the spectacle surrounding Le Patron-Minette. There are significant resemblances between Lacenaire and the members of the gang. Most prominently, Lacenaire's presence is evident in Babette's eloquent speech and deceptive manner, while Brujon, a prominent affiliate of the gang, shares Lacenaire's penchant for writing poetry and verses, which allegedly grants him great authority in the novel. These implicit comparisons were not lost on the original readership of the time. In fact, in a satirical parody, published the same year as Hugo's novel, mockingly entitled Les Anti-Misérables, Babette is directly compared to the celebrity criminal, being called an aspirant Lacenaire. Other contemporary critics of the novel, including Armand de Pontmartin, expressed frustration at Hugo for using this real crook as a type of literature villain for comparison. Yet I find the comparison particularly compelling, as it explicitly evidences that Victor Hugo's influences for the Patron-Minette characters were loosely inspired by real-life spectacles of criminality. Lacenaire played a crucial role in the shaping of the elegant criminal stereotype that emerged in France during the early 19th century. He epitomised this persona with his dandyish style, wit, and charm, presenting himself as a cultured and sophisticated criminal. Cesare Lombroso highlights the significant impact Lacenaire had in shaping society's expectations of criminal behaviour. His persona represented a romanticised version of criminality that divorced itself from the harsh realities faced by many impoverished and marginalised individuals, as historian David Richer points out in Hollingsworth's research. While there exists a little bit of Lacenairian influence within each of the four Patron-Minette leads, if we were to ask who embodies the elegant criminal's attributes the most, Montparnasse would undoubtedly be the answer. Although Lacenaire is well educated and the son of a merchant, unlike Montparnasse, who grew up as a Parisian gourmand, just like the real Lacenaire, the fictional Montparnasse has an equally extravagant personality. He wears his dandy fashions and is described as charming, but he simultaneously is brutal, possessing all the vices and aspiring to all the crimes. Most significantly, like Lacenaire, Montparnasse has fans in the form of the murmur of admiration from the girls on the boulevard, despite the fact that few prowlers are as feared. It is this particular detail that accentuates the connection between Montparnasse and Lacenaire, and raises crucial questions about the allure of crime and its theatrical sensation that appeals to the masses. I feel compelled to also discuss how fiction intersects with reality through Lacenaire's intriguing memoirs, which I unfortunately won't have time to discuss in detail today, but I thoroughly recommend to anyone interested in the broader topic of criminal theatrics. Lacenaire's writings have garnered significant attention from scholars examining the convergence of literature and crime, because they can offer a unique glimpse into the transformation of crime into sensation. As Kieran Conliffe points out, and I quote, "The petty criminal and murderer of old women became the elegant criminal, the doomed anti-hero of 1,000 stories. He was Valbert, the noble bandit in Stendhal's unfinished draft of Lamiel. He was Raskolnikov, the insane philosopher-murderer of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. He was Montparnasse, the nattily dressed killer from Les Misérables. He inspired an entire milieu of romantic and varied evil, but it must not be forgotten, all of this was based on his own account of himself, which was, as Weil would have agreed, more fiction than fact." Therefore, while Lacenaire might have labelled his writings as memoirs, they should not be taken as a truthful account. Instead, they exist within the broader context of the growing popularity of crime sensation fiction during that time, and this is an important factor to highlight when we consider the Patron-Minette as being characters inspired by this famous rogue. To provide context, the 19th century saw a sudden emergence of crime sensation literature across Europe. This new genre, known as Roman noir in France and Newgate fiction in England, focused on crime, violence and societal decay, as highlighted by Stephen Knight. The timing of this genre's emergence is crucial, as historian Erica Minucci points out. With crime fiction surfacing in post-revolution France at the time, when many were exploring the darker, more chaotic aspects of human nature. Many critics also attribute the increased popularity of these sorts of fictions in alignment with the transgression of Gothic terror into social realms across literature. Considering all these factors, it is no wonder that European society in the 1800s developed an obsession with crime and decadence. This fascination is not lost within the fictional narrative of Les Misérables either. Much like Lacenaire's dramatised and sensational memoirs that ensured his fame and continued legacy, we are told that many of the Patron-Minette members remained famous beyond the novel's narrative, thanks to memoirs being written about them. Through this, Victor Hugo directly applies crime sensation literature to these fictional criminals. Narratives about the Patron-Minette not only exist through the police records, but Hugo also credits fictional memoirs as being the reason why he can document many of the criminals involved in the gang, including both the gang's four figureheads and the Patron-Minette principal affiliates. Part 3. Assembling the ensemble, the gang's affiliates. The theatrical sensation of crime is not just perpetrated through the four heads of the Patron-Minette. However, in fact, when we are introducing this gang, Victor Hugo also takes the time to include the names of 18 additional characters who are described as principal affiliates of the Patron-Minette. As these accomplices are listed off, Hugo once more makes a direct comparison between crime and theatre, writing that sometimes you can tell what a play is like from the list of characters. Similarly, you can more or less appreciate a gang by the list of gangsters. As a collective, the affiliates represent the dregs of society, and again they exist on the lowest substage, where man becomes beast, just like Babette, Claquesous, Gullimer, and Montparnasse. These general criminals are also shapes of living mist. You'd say they were one with the darkness. However, some distinctions can in fact be made from this list about the kinds of roles that these characters might play upon examining the minor details of the associate crooks who briefly appear in the narrative. I feel compelled here to briefly discuss the character of Brujon, who is perhaps the most recognisable accomplice of the Patron-Minette due to his pivotal role in orchestrating the gang's escape from La Force prison. When Brujon is initially introduced, Hugo reveals that he comes from a notable dynasty of criminal Brujons, and whilst we as readers are never quite privy to the character's previous history, there is a fascinating detail that highlights the impact of the familial legacy. During the chapters set in La Force, where the majority of the Patron-Minette were locked up following the failed Gorbeau ambush incident, we discover the name of Brujon's father is etched into a wall carved. The carving is dated to 1811, a whole 21 years prior to the imprisonment of his son. With this single symbol, Brujon the younger is characterised in the image of an actor destined for the stage, an understudy stepping into the spotlight and continuing his criminal family's legacy as they step down from their roles, following directly in the footsteps of his father. Whilst many might pass over the names of these seemingly insignificant affiliates, who we don't see in the narrative, a closer examination would reveal that all of the aliases of these affiliates are drawn from numerous stereotypes of criminality, thus making them all performers of crime in their own right, and making it important for my discussion today. There is an important purpose to these unusual aliases. They usually signify the roles that various criminals have stepped into over the years. For example, Baraccarose references the traditional highwayman, crook with the name meaning coach rod in English. Demi-Lard is kind of a coinage and thus implies the character is a thief, and Panchaud's aliases all have violent connotations, suggesting a thuggish nature. Like a long-running production, even if the cast changes, the characters remain the same. To quote Hugo, the individuals may be eradicated, but the tribe lives on. A different stage, Les Pieds en l'air and Fauntleroy. Interestingly, among this list of affiliate criminals, there exist two characters who are almost certainly women, namely Fauntleroy, alias Bouquetière, aka the Flower Girl, and Les Pieds en l'air. Although neither of these characters appear in the novel beyond just their name, it surprises me that critics have not taken the time to closer examine them, because from just their names alone, these criminal women are purposefully made distinct from male criminals, and therefore are thrust onto a gendered stage of their own. Les Pieds en l'air's very name denotes prostitution, translated in English as feet in the air. Through this character, Victor Hugo makes a bawdy joke referring to a sex position, thus indicating her status and criminal stereotype, which would seemingly be an unregistered sex worker. Fauntleroy would have also been understood in relation to sex work amongst contemporary readership, as although her alias is Bouquetière, adult women working as flower girls were generally understood to be prostitutes across society at the time. This is pointed out in Henry Mayhew in 1851, who wrote that flower girls avail themselves of the sale of flowers in the streets for immoral purposes, mixing up a leer with their wine for custom or for charity. This examination does not just stop at these two affiliates, however. When it comes to characters loosely existing within the Patron-Minette sphere of influence, we find Babette's mistress. Again, we do not know much about her apart from the fact that she is locked up in La Salpêtrière, a prison known for holding unregistered prostitutes in this period, as well as overly dramatic, hysterical women. Furthermore, the cut Patron-Minette chapters in Victor Hugo's Reliquat des Misérables, we learn of numerous nameless women who are associated with this band of thieves, all of whom are prostitutes. Hugo deliberately highlights that men and women involved in crime exist within separate spheres in these cut chapters. introducing these two distinct groups as follows. The murderer, flower for the courtesan, the prostitute, Clytie of the sun assassin, the eye of the damned searching languidly in the myrtles for Satan. While Hugo emphasises that he does not intend to sensationalise prostitution and states, horror it be, caricature never, these fallen women are simultaneously described in the same theatrical fashion as the male criminals we see in the published novel. These sex workers are quoted as being great spectacles of deformity, and likewise become theatrical and sensational. With this, another theatrical stage emerges, and this time it is gendered. As Lisa Downing points out, the criminal woman has historically always been sexualized. Even if Fauntleroy and Le Pieds en l'air are murderers and thieves, unlike the aliases of the other Patron-Minette affiliates, their names still primarily suggest their sexual availability. Their criminal theatre exists in a distinct space from that of the men, and thus their criminal sensation revolves around sexuality rather than armed robberies and brutal theft. Just as we find ourselves fascinated by witnessing daring and perilous acts in the circus, we are also morbidly captivated by the inherent spectacle of reading about dastardly crimes and villainous criminals. It is evident that our shared fascination with the forbidden and the sensational finds its expression through these intertwined narratives, hence why it is so natural for crime and theatre to combine within the narrative of Les Misérables. The Patron-Minette characters and their actions provide a lens through which we can better understand the societal perceptions of crime in the 19th century. Their villainy, as noted by Grossman, is multifarious, and the group employs a cast of thousands of stereotyped, fictional, and real crooks to use as figures of inspiration for this quartet of crooks and their principal affiliates, nation, with crime and criminality itself. The gang's social evils thus take on a theatrical quality, and they perform on the social stage for our entertainment. With this, these crooks simultaneously intrigue and frighten us, and, most importantly, they hold up a mirror to our collective fascination with the darker aspects of human nature. As we reach to the end of this exploration into crime and theatrics, I find it important to highlight that the Patron-Minette are not merely characters solely generated by Hugo's imagination. Rather, they are representative of a timeless theme deeply embedded in our cultural consciousness. The echoes of their dramatic existence continue to resonate within the vast realm of literature, challenging us to confront the intricacies of our own fascination with the theatricality of crime. It is this enduring intrigue surrounding the Patron-Minette that holds the greatest significance, and it should encourage us to delve deeper into their characters and provoke further critical thought. Thank you for listening.